spiritual dimension that's in the writings that we see. I mean, it cuts across all kinds of disciplines. There's fiction and nonfiction and science and poetry all the way across. And I think there is a connection spiritually because people are just so amazed by this place, by the flora and the fauna and the human dimension, that it's just expressed in so many different ways. But at the core, at the root of it, is there's just something about this place that just moves you internally. And no matter how you regard it, I think there's a way to express it either by the pen or in literature or in a drawing, that I think there's just so many different aspects and facets to this place.
I think there's it's obvious that in every discipline that passion, that spirit that really does show up. But I've yet, as a biologist, I've read many books and pieces on the natural history of the Sierra Nevada, which are actually pretty succinct, and they're simply, these are the trees and these are the birds and this is the geology and so on, and they kind of lack that spirituality, except that if you read some of the other journals of these scientists and so on, you find that passion, the amazement, the power, the light, the sunrises and the sunsets and the sound of the water, and it's very, very clear that there is a spiritual component, even in the driest and most pragmatic of scientific art.
I think a really great example of that is Clarence King, because he has these kind of scientific monographs on stuff, and then in his book about the Sierra, I mean, you see this passage about him seeing the Yosemite Valley, and he says the sky was shimmering with diamond particles. That's a scientist who's been moved in some way, and so I think that's just exactly what Joe was talking about.
One of the reasons that I love the Sierra literature is because for most of my life I lived about 150, 200 miles from the range, which was close enough to get here, but not be here all the time. And I'm not a winter sports person, so during the winters, when I couldn't get here on my weekends and on my vacations, I would go to the Oakland Museum and look at those wonderful paintings by Bierstadt and Thomas Hill and William Keith. And sometimes it would have to drag me away. Well, the same thing with the literature is it sustained me in the months when I couldn't get to the Sierra. And it was a really wonderful experience for me and my daughters and now even my grandchildren to share some of that literature. Oh, I think it's so important that literature can draw people into the Sierra Nevada. I know it's somewhat controversial to get large numbers of people up into the high country, but like William Brower, I agree that if you don't get more people up there, you won't have a constituency to help protect it. And it's so good for me. It's so good for everybody that I've ever known that's gone there. It makes you a little bit better person. Puts things in better perspective.
And I've always felt that the avenue to understanding in literature, I think the best way is through fiction. And in taking this setting, this magnificent setting that the Sierra is, and tying it to a fictional story that moves you emotionally is just a fantastic way to raise your awareness and to promote action on your part. Something that emotionally directs you toward a new vision of something, I think is really valuable. And I think that, to me, in the Sierra Nevada literature, that's the function of the fictional parts, is that it gets you attached to this place that you're already motivated to like, but really gets you emotionally connected to it. I think fiction really plays an important role in that.
Makes me think about the resurgence of the Lorax lately. With a whimsical fictional story that is dead on all about sustainability and doing the right thing. That's the kind of fiction that makes people want to respond to environmental concerns. And I think that literature is extremely important. I agree with both of you folks. Rick, you made me think about, the invitation. It draws you into, my gosh, I'm reading this thing because somebody said it was really a great book, but it tells me about a specific place. I want to go see this place. I mean, this is what John Muir talked about so much, was climb the mountains and get their good tidings. Right. He knew that you had to build a constituency, and he dragged them up there in unsustainable hordes sometimes as well. But to get them to fall in love with the Sierra Nevada, and they were writing letters to their congressman, and they were pinning, important pieces of conversations back and forth to spread that word as well. But a part of literature is also art and photographs and components that are added into these books. I think that when you look at denuded Lake Tahoe landscapes, or you look at the phenomenal environmental devastation of the hydraulic mining and Malakoff diggings, and you look at devastated areas, that visualization makes you realize that there's got to be a better way than this if we're going to maintain the resource, the beauty, the clear watersheds, all of these kinds of things. There has to be some mechanism by which, and we know this today, we have the mechanisms in place. We just don't always have the political willpower. But literature, photographs, artwork, stories, fiction, nonfiction, it's all telling the same things, all bringing this complex and multi-dimensional range together.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to work as a typesetter in the Bay Area, and among my clients were the Sierra Club, and so I got to do field guides, and I'm pretty ignorant of science, and I found that the more that I knew, I mean, not to the level that Joe would go and see any plant or any tree in the Sierra, but that I could tell the difference between a cedar and a pine at least, it was helpful to me in making me appreciate it. So, it helped me a lot.
Well, when I put together my list of books, one of the very first books I put on it was this book, The Laws Field Guide to the Sierra Nevada, which is all about plants and animals and stuff. And I'm not a sciencey kind of guy, but this book was just so moving to me to see the incredible diversity and the beautiful work of Jack Laws on this, that this informed me a lot about the Sierra, because I'd always looked at things from a human perspective, being a historian by trade. This really expanded my understanding of the Sierra massively, and so that was an absolute must for me to have that book on the list.
Marvelous cross-pollination, cross-fertilization, or whatever. This topic makes me think of Gary Snyder, who's back on the fire. So much of his recent poetry and literature and so on is science-based, everything from bioregionalism to his understanding of fire and forestation, deforestation, bioregionalism, really understanding your place. And you couldn't find a more literary person, really, than Gary Snyder. Yet, he comes in contact with fabulous block print artists, like Tom Killian, and they both, one's an artist, one is a writer, a poet, and through science they weave this magnificent piece of work together. You can look at a mountain and be inspired by it, but you want to go over and have a look at it and see if it's granite or volcanic or whatever. You can't help but start to learn from the physical and biological aspects of it.
I would like those who look at our list, who look at these books, to take the very next step, that's just reading them, just looking at them isn't enough. Use this as a vehicle to go visit the mountains.
Yeah.
John Muir said, climb the mountains and get their good tidings. Ink on a piece of paper isn't enough to know how to experience the Sierra. You have to go. And I hope that these will be a magic carpet for many people.